Welcome back to another DIY ornament. You'll be needing things like paintbrushes, all different kinds, water, all different types of paints. I'm using acrylic wash, and I have Posca markers at the ready. I'm also using some paper towels, a little palette I can throw away, and I've got my acrylic paint as well. Let's start with the pouncer brush. We're going to start first with a little bit of like a nectarine or a peach fuzz kind of vibe. So we are going with Jaune Brilliant first. After that will be light apricot, and the whole trick is to not have any water on your brush. Don't forget to play some music or turn on your favorite show just so that you have something to listen to while you work, as I'll be jumping in and out of the video. After focusing a bit more on the inside and leaving my Jaune Brilliant on the outside for a natural shadow, I go back with Jaune Brilliant and add some shadows under the eyes, under the mouth, and just kind of around the edges of the fur where the fur would overlap this like little belly that they have. Next, to warm it up, I'm using Coral Red, and I just want to make sure I barely tap down, and that way I blend it into what's still hopefully a little bit damp. You can always grab some of that light apricot or any soft color that you're using as like a peach, and you can add a little bit to it just to soften it. If I was to use all of it, it would be very oversaturated and really bold, and I kind of want the nose and the fur to be that color. So I don't want to double down on that. I want to make this one a very soft pastel. Up next, I'm grabbing like a crimson tone, and I'm going to start making all of the undertone of the fur. This is going to create a natural shadow. So again, less water or no water for this. The drier it is, the faster it will dry. Now, throughout the painting, you have to ask yourself, well, I already have this on my brush. Where else can I use it? Or the lid's already off. Let me just try to start covering other things with it while I've got it. So that's what I did with the mouth and the nose as well. And now I'm going in with that Coral Red again. I would have actually mixed it a little bit more, but over time, you're going to see that the colors start to come back and pop. So I covered a lot of the crimson red, but it's also blending into it. And I'm marrying the two colors to make it like a nice, soft kind of pink tone. And how much of this you add, or maybe you've chosen blue, just do a dark blue and then go to a lighter blue and mix them together and then change the fur color. Everything I'm doing, you're going to use that same idea for whatever colors you have. So if you're using a yellow, you do a dark yellow first and then you bring in a lighter yellow. And if you blend them together, it's even better. For the eyes, I'm using an off-white color. This could be a beige, this could be a misty green, a misty blue. Now for that Dole Whip, which I do know that the parks have updated their Dole Whip. So if you want to change the color of this, you can, but let's use the same rules. No water, dark to light. So we're going to go with our darkest yellow. This is more of a mustard yellow or any color close to that. And then we're going to go back to add brighter yellows for highlights. You can always mix some white in, but it shouldn't be the rule for everything. If you're using a dark crimson red and you keep adding white to it, it's not going to give the effect that you're looking for. It's better to find pinks in all different tones and go lighter and lighter and lighter. Same for yellow, same for blue. But yellow seems to be the most forgiving with using white for everything. So if you need to highlight it and use only one yellow, you can definitely keep using different yellows as you go and adding white to it. So here I'm taking that same color, because what did I say? If it's already on the brush, let's keep it going. Let's keep using those colors. I'm starting with a darker yellow again, and I'm just adding those low lights kind of back to the Dole Whip and showing where the swirls are. Now this is where I go back and I take some more of that Coral Red and I highlight just a little bit. I'm using a mop brush and I'm just highlighting some areas. So right under that little swirl on top where it's like a little curl, I'm just adding a tiny bit of highlight. I'm not going to go back and highlight every single piece of the fur. This is going to make it look realistic, give it some dimension, and this is where the shadows are going to start to really pop. We're going to avoid some areas like under the arm. We're going to avoid right next to the horn. We're going to leave a little bit of shadow after you decide where the sun is hitting. So the sun's hitting more top of the head, and as it goes down, it's casting a shadow. So just try to take note of where I've placed it. You can do whatever you need, but this is about how I would do it. I take that same coral red because it's already out, lids off, and I'm going to put it on the nose and the tongue. Now, this is why I work with whole bin acrylic wash. It's because the color you see on the tube is the color you're going to get. And this is going to change that pink. And we're going to highlight that umbrella now, and it's going to take it to a whole another color. Since it's on the brush, what are we going to do? I'm going to look around and see, is there anywhere else I can merge this? Maybe a little highlight on the nose, maybe some on the tongue. I'm going to splash a little on that little top curl because that's the brightest part of where the sun is hitting. And I'm just kind of using it to show the curl. And then I'm just going to place it as little highlights of where the sun might barely be hitting it to add that light. So be really careful not to overdo it. We don't want it to match our little umbrella. We're just kind of splashing it around and blending it in. Next is white, and we're going to start to add a little highlight to the bottom of the eyes. This is before the pupils go in, and we're just going to blend that into the off-white that you've used earlier. It's on your brush, so what do? We look for other areas that we can splash it. The acrylic is a bit more watered down than the acrylic wash when it comes out of the bottle, so I'm just using that. I haven't added any water, and I'm using my round brush to kind of add these little highlights to the horns. I want the little jagged edges at the bottom of the horns so that it shows kind of that there's some texture to the horns. As my acrylic white is starting to dry now that I've moved around and worked to other areas, I'm just blending it a little softer, adding a couple more highlights in different areas. And since I already have the white on the brush, I grabbed a little bit of that coral red and I'm just going back over a few things. This is where I said I kind of wanted to change the color a bit more. Now, even though I used that really bright hot pink on it, I decided, I want to bring it down to like more of a muted pink and more of like a peachy tone, I guess. And so this softened it more, and I'm just barely touching down. I'm letting the brush do the work. No water, just letting it kind of touch down in different areas. And that way the brush is kind of just picking and choosing where it wants to go. Sometimes I let it dance on the ornament so that way I can just let it happen naturally and not look like it's so placed. And you'll see there's some areas where it looks like it's unfinished, but when it's done, it will look more realistic. So don't overthink it. Just kind of let the brush go where it needs to go. And what's left on my brush is just going to be like a little rouge that goes around the eyes. This is casting a little bit of a shadow, and it's sticking with the same colors we've already used. For the churro, I'm using like a burnt sienna. I have a little bit of a red tone into that brown. So that way it gives it a little bit more warmth than just brown. Because when you do use brown, it's not very appealing. But we will go back and kind of add some little edges and lines in there a little bit later. Since I have this kind of reddish brown, I'm just adding a little bit of a shadow to the bottom of the horns. The exact same way I splashed the white around, I'm just kind of taking the brush as it's drying. And now I've used a yellow ochre to just add a little bit more of a yellow tone to the churro. Making the lines go up and down is really going to help the churro have those little ridges naturally. I am going back with white and just splashing more of a white on the horns now that it's starting to dry. You can see I've barely got white on my brush. That way I can add little highlights to my churro. And now I'm going to take the white and add a little bit to the paper that goes around the churro. If you want to sprinkle a little bit of sugar, you can always take some white and splash it around. If you want to try other colors like a yellow or gold, this will also make it look like it has a little bit of a sugary texture to it. And since I have my tiny little brush and I'm adding some white highlights to the eyes, this is going to start to make the eyes look more glossy and realistic. Now start to splash that white anywhere else you see, especially since you have your tiny little brush. Just find little details that you can add. Don't overdo it, just add some. You don't need to go crazy. And we're also gonna add the little bowl, the little dish that it's in. We're gonna end up coming back and using another color as well, but this white is gonna create a little bit of a barrier, create a shine so it looks like the Dole Whip is inside. And I've decided to add a little white to the umbrella and the umbrella little pole that is holding it up. And then that way, when I add any colors over it, it will definitely separate from the yellow. Now I'm going to go back with some of this pink and just highlight over the white acrylic once that acrylic white is starting to dry. That's going to add, again, natural highlights, but it's not going to look as placed. I'm not drawing the lines perfectly. I'm letting it kind of splash around. And now it's time for the pupils. The smaller the brush, the better. You can choose to have your pupils looking up, looking down. I've created the highlights in areas for it to look down. So the shadow is at the top of the eyes and more the brightness is at the pupil. So that's our focus. But if you decide you want to draw the pupils a different way, or paint them, I should say, that's perfectly fine. Have fun trying to make the eyes look a different direction. And if you do want to do it this way, the smaller the dots are, the more you can kind of expand them over time. See if you like the angle of them, see if you like the size of those, and then if you do, start to fill it in. If you go too big, it's hard to go backwards. Now you can take your canvas and rotate it as you work. Remember, you can always do this, but the softer you touch your brush down, the better the line work's gonna be. I do have a little bit of water, and this is acrylic black. I'm using a matte acrylic, not a glossy acrylic, and I'm just working my way in a comfortable fashion so that I move from the angle that feels most comfortable and pull towards myself or away from myself. So try to practice your line weights of going skinny to thick just by pressing down on your brush and lifting up on your brush as you make a line. And you can always go back and thicken it, just like the pupils. If you start too big, it's hard to go backwards. Start small and just keep adding a little bit to it. If it helps to draw a little bit of a line with a permanent marker, you can do that too before you start all of the black. Now I'm going to come back with a crimson red mixed with a little bit of that black that was on my brush. So on my palette is technically a little bit of a dark red mixed with a tiny bit of that black. And that way I'm getting more of a darker tone for the back of the mouth. I'm also tracing around the mouth. And since I have that tiny brush, I'm going to switch over to coral red and I'm going to be adding a little bit of a lip around that. So that's what that is. It might be hard to see, but that's just a little bit of a crimson red, creating a little bit of lips. And then I'm just adding a little smile line on each side. Keeping a little bit of that crimson red on my palette, I mixed it in with some coral red, so a little bit of the fur color with the darker crimson tone, and I'm adding a little bit of a bridge to the nose, a little bit of eyebrows. I'm going to highlight a little bit more now that the back of the mouth is dry. I want it to pop a little bit more with a brighter color. I'm showing where the little swirl is, and I'm doing my line work. Now, a lot of people do line work in black. I always say save the black and the white tones for the things you really, really need, because when you overuse them, it doesn't look realistic, and also it just looks really heavy. So if you can make your line work just the darkest shade of whatever color you were using as your main base, then that's going to work a lot better. I'm just taking my little pouncer brush, totally dry, nothing's on it, no water, and I'm just blending things out. So be really careful that the black is dry for the eyelashes and the pupils before you start adding all these extra things because you will hit the black and it will smear all over the face, all in the eye. So it's better just to be patient, let it dry, go do something else, and come back. Now we're just adding all of our line work, so I will leave you guys to it. Here's where I grab Coral Red, the original color I really, really liked, and I'm just adding a little bit more of a highlight back. So it's a lot of back and forth. You don't have any rules. If you want to go back and you want to add more shadows, you want to add more highlights, go for it. Experiment, have fun. The worst that's going to happen is you don't like it, you wait for it to dry, and you go for it again. Just make sure you don't keep working in the same spot for too long because the little paper that's on the MDF board will start to pill, and that just means a lot of the little pieces are going to start to come up. So remember, this is fragile. Even though it seems like a piece of wood, this is pressed particle board, so you have to be really careful as you're painting it not to overwork it. Let things dry. Come back the next day, look at it again with fresh eyes. Next, I want to start to add some color in the eyes. So I used a deep turquoise to go in the pupils. And you'll see right here when it zooms in that I did not go the full way around the black. I just added as a little highlight. Now I'm going to take my turquoise, and this is where we're going to add more highlights. We're going to go around the edge of our Dole Whip. If you want to keep it just with the white, that's fine. But these two colors play really well together. I'm also using this as a shadow base. And I splash a little bit inside the eyes, and I go from two different directions trying to match them up with my acrylic white, and I add little dots to the eyes, little highlights, and over the pupils I add one little line, and I just have more white on the brush so that way I don't have to go back over it 3 times. It's just a tap and move on, a tap and move on. And we're going to splash a little bit of this into the coral red for the fur, a little bit on the horns. Now you get to paint your little Disney hat any color you would like. I went with turquoise, so again, sticking with a similar palette. We've got yellow, turquoise, blue, and a coral red. I mean, that's pretty much the main tones. I go back now that everything's dry. I use my yellow ochre, and I start to add lowlights back into things. This is a great one for my churro. I'm drawing straight lines up and down. That first color we used on the churro is now starting to show through as the line work. I take a little bit of yellow watered down and I add a little bit more yellow into my horns. So I almost watercolored it over and then using a mop brush kind of soaked up anything left over from the yellow I put on the horns. This is me just going back and adding highlights. Now that things are dry, that paint is really going to start to show up. It's not going to blend or sink in. I bust out the Posca markers, and this one was a choice. I did not know I was going to add purple as a highlight, and I love it. It probably became my favorite part of the piece. Was something new I've never tried, is to totally switch my color and add it as a highlight. So instead of using a bright pink, I decided to use purple. I'm now going back through and adding my line work with this Posca marker that I felt would be beautiful to play against the coral red. Anywhere that I needed to blend it out a little bit more before it dried, I would use my brush and just kind of push it around a little bit and soften it. Now I'm going to bust out my favorite Gorilla Glue. This is the 10-second quick drying non-gel Gorilla Glue. Don't get it confused because I have before and that glue does not dry. So we want to use the fast drying 10-second Gorilla Glue, and we're just adding the hat to the front. You can also add the hat to the back. And I decided to do little loop-de-loos with that same burnt sienna that I used earlier. It's kind of that reddish brown. And I'm just doing some little loops through the horn. You can do lines, you can do little curved edges, but I thought this would be extra cute. And using that burnt sienna, I just kind of make some straight lines down the center and add a little bit of a shadow with it. That way my churro looks complete. And there you have her. I hope you guys had fun with this DIY ornament.